And we are in this study of the book of 1 John. And I hope that you can remember at least one phrase of what we were saying last week. We were in chapter 2. It's taking us longer to get through this study than what I had thought. We were in chapter 2, verses 3 through 6, and we caught this one phrase. If you claim to know Jesus, then you live like Jesus lived. And we tried to kind of capture the sense of what that meant. And this morning, we're going to kind of go into one aspect of what John is going to talk about. And it's, if you look at the bottom of that little slide, you kind of see the title of this. It's the subject of love. And I know you've heard talk after talk after talk on the subject of love. I have yet to figure it out completely. I have not been able to put it in practice like I should. And I suspect that everybody in the audience here in the building can say the same thing. And I suspect that everybody who's listening from a distance today can say also the same thing. Haven't got it all figured out, and certainly haven't put it all into practice. But I want to approach it this morning a little differently. I want you to look at this subject of love from the perspective, through the eyes of the writer John. I want you to kind of put yourself in his place. Because we believe that when he wrote the book of 1 John, he's really old. He's near the end of what we call this life. But can you remember for a moment the time when he first met Jesus? He had a brother. Remember his brother's name? James and John. And they made their living as fishermen. And most people say, or at least a lot of people say, that when Jesus called these disciples, they were very, very young. Some say they might even have been in their teens in terms of age, very young. And here these two were out and they were fisher people. They were able to go out into the waters, and they would mess with the sails. They would sometimes row the boat, and they would put those nets over the side. And sometimes they would haul the nets back in. They would be full of fish, and sometimes they would be empty, but they would always be wet. So you can imagine how strong they were and how much physical labor it took. And you remember who they were also called? The sons of thunder, the sons of thunder. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means that they were a little bombastic, or they're a little bit pranksters, or a little bit loud, or I don't know what it means. But they were full of life, apparently. And Jesus came by and he said, I want you to follow me. And James and John, it says, left their nets. They left their boats, and they began to follow Jesus. It's all brand new. Why did they follow Jesus? As we noted last week, not because of his physical appearance, because when he came from heaven and put on the flesh, he made sure that he wouldn't put on flesh that was appealing to mankind. That's what Isaiah tells us. But it would have been his words. It would have been his mannerisms. And they were drawn to Jesus. And it would be James and John and Peter who would kind of become the inner circle of Jesus. And if you read Matthew's account of the life of Jesus, it's apparently very early in their time of following Jesus. They'll be on the side of a mountain and they'll hear Jesus talk. And he'll say a lot of different kinds of things. But nothing will he say that will compare to these words. Listen to these words in Matthew chapter 5, beginning in verse 43. You have heard that it has been said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I tell you, now that seems really reasonable, doesn't it? If Jesus would have stopped there, you think James and John and Peter and all the others would have thought, we get that one, we understand that one. And I understand that one. I understand that really well. It feels kind of right. But I tell you, Jesus said, my way, my kingdom, I tell you, love your enemies. Can you imagine James and John hearing that and kind of looking at one another and rolling their eyes a little bit, thinking, what does that mean? Love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. What a thought. When is the last time you prayed for someone who was treating you in a really bad way? And you really prayed over and over again for them. I want you to pray for those who persecute you, that you may be called the children of your Father who is in heaven. Wow. That's what it means to be called a child of God, that I would pray for those who are persecuting me. And he continues. He causes the sun. Your Father causes the sun to rise on the good, and he sends rain and the evil and the good, and he sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. And if all you do is you love those who love you, what reward will that get you? Well, even the tax collectors are doing that. Even those who are notorious for their sinfulness are doing that. If you greet only your own people, if you're friendly only to your own people, what are you doing more than anybody else in this world? Do not even the pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. We always get confused about that verse, but it must have something to do with this ability to love those who are even the ones who mistreat us. Now, John is a young man when he hears that. And over the next year, maybe 2 years, John watches Jesus. And he sees how Jesus treats everyone with kindness. And they probably, all those disciples, probably hear over and over the sharp criticisms that will come toward Jesus from the religious community. And there were sharp criticisms. And the apostles had to carry some of those criticisms with them, because they would fend them off. You remember how they would come and say, well, why is it that this Jesus that you follow goes into the house of a tax collector or a sinner and eats with him? And they would say things over and over again like that. And they would say them to Jesus also. But they would watch Jesus never, ever lose his temper. They would watch Jesus be calm. One of the principles I tell people all the time over at the university is never flinch. Never flinch. When somebody comes with you with some kind of criticism, some kind of problem, some kind of complaint, some kind of anything, never flinch. Never give what you're thinking away. Take time and think about what you're going to say. They would watch Jesus live like this. And a couple of years pass, and they come now to the end of the public ministry of Jesus. It really didn't last that long, did it? I mean, we know that for about 30 years he was really hidden from the world in a little town called Nazareth. Then he stepped out into the public stage by being baptized by John. And he began all this teaching, but it didn't last all long, 3 years. I mean, I was talking with one of our grandsons yesterday, and he said he's got a big test next week in biology, and he's did it very quickly to spring break. And I said, after spring break, you only got 2 or 3 weeks left of serious work, and then it's finals. And he said to me, this first year of college has gone so very, very quickly. 3 years would have gone so very, very quickly. And now we've come to the last night of Jesus on this earth, this side of the cross. Now, I know that Jesus was raised from the dead, and so do you. And I know that 40 days he was seen by people. But I'm talking about this side of the cross, the last night. And it was such a different night, wasn't it? Because Jesus gathered together those apostles, and one will slip out and become the betrayer. But he'll gather together in that upper room, and they'll have that Last Supper. And Jesus will talk to them. And he'll say, I'm going away, and where I'm going, you cannot come. And they have this sinking feeling. And you know what that sinking feeling feels like. It's this feeling of dread. It's this feeling of being overwhelmed. What do I do next? How am I going to live my life from this time forth? And some of you have been through that. Some of you have been through major loss in your life. And you know things will never be the same again. And you have this weight on you. What am I going to do with it? And Jesus says all these words. But I want you to listen to some that John would have heard, still as a very young man. You know the words, don't you, in John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35? A new command I give you. Now Jesus is talking just with 11 men. I'm giving you a new command. You love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. And by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. I have to let you in on a little secret. There's nobody in town today paying any attention of whether or not you came to church, this church building. And there's no one in this town being impressed by the fact that you came to this church building today. But I'll tell you what will impress them, either to a positive way or a negative way. The way you treat them tomorrow. The way you deal with them tomorrow will make the difference. And Jesus said, I want you to love one another. And that's how people are going to know that you belong to me. And John would have heard all that. And he sees Jesus go away, and he's watching the other apostles as they go scatter across the earth preaching the name of Jesus. And he probably hears the story, and he knows firsthand some of the experiences of how one apostle after another dies. Even his own brother died at a young age. And here he is. He's the last one left. And as an older person, knowing that death is right around the corner, he's looking out to Christians. And he's talking to people even like us, though he probably did not have a clue that it would be carried on this far and that you and I would be talking about his words today. But he's writing to people there he's so concerned about. And listen what he says right after he says, if you claim to know him, know Jesus, then you must live like he lived. Right after he said that, listen to these words in 1 John chapter 2, beginning verse 7. Dear friends, I'm not writing you a new command, but an old one, which you have had since the beginning. Now, I've rethought that this week. I've wondered, what did he mean there when you've had it since the beginning? I used to think, well, that's kind of been the standard since the days of Adam. I'm wondering now if he's saying, you've known this since the beginning of the time that Jesus came to this earth. I'm wondering if he's thinking about his beginning with Jesus. This is how it all started with Jesus. I'll never forget the time I was on the side of that mountain with Jesus. And I'll never forget how he talked about the things, how we talk to each other. And he talked about so many different things. But that day he talked about love when he said, you love even your enemies. It was stunning. I couldn't figure it out. The old command is the message you have heard. Yet I am writing you a new command. Its truth is seen in Him, in Jesus. He was the standard. That's how you know. Watch Jesus. And His truth is being seen in you. This new command is being seen in how you live. Because the darkness is passing. You stepped out of this world and you stepped into the kingdom of light. The darkness is passing. The true light is already shining. Anyone who claims to be in the light, anyone who claims, and you just need to read this for yourself. I'm not going to make a lot of commentary about it. You got to decide what you think. Anyone who claims to be in the light, claims to be a follower of Jesus, but hates a brother or sister is still in darkness. And I really don't know what the word hate means right there. I don't know right now that I could say I hate a single person on this earth. But I can tell you this. There are some I like a whole lot better than others. Is that true for you? And there are some who bother me. And there are some who get on my nerves. And there are some that I don't want to be around because I don't trust them. Does that surprise you? I'm not saying that you're just running up and hugging everybody. I'm not going to run up and hug Rob. You know, we're not going to go that far. But I don't know exactly what it means. But I think it means something like harboring these ill feelings and this ugly thought and this hard-heartedness whereby you will never forgive. And I think it means something about there are people for whom you would never pray because you just don't like them that much. But Jesus said, pray for them all. And Jesus said, do good for all of them. And He did. Even the ones who would call Him names. You know that they called Jesus Satan? Now you can never get so far opposite anytime, anywhere, any place. You can't get so far opposite than to call Jesus Satan. And they did. But I kind of know what it is to get criticized. I mean, when you are, how do I say this? When you're in some kind of leadership position, you have been for 40 years, I have to tell you, anytime something goes wrong in the organization, you end up being the one who gets the criticism. You end up getting the criticism. And sometimes you just walk away and shake your head and think, it is so unfair. It's so unfair. But does that give me a right? Does that give me a license because they criticize me wrongly? Does that give me a right to lambast and be mean and to be ugly? Never flinch. In fact, never flinch, but pray for them. And go ahead and be good to them. The interesting thing I found is they don't know how to handle that. They don't know how to handle that when they're being mean and you're being good. And you don't fight back like they fight. They don't know how to handle that. Anyone who loves their brother and sister lives in light. There's nothing in them to make them stumble. Now, I want you to really capture those kind of words because it's kind of like what Jesus said. He's kind of rephrasing what Jesus said that night before He died. He said, by this all men will know that you are my disciples. I'm telling you, if you live in love, if you master this thing of love, if you learn how to behave in love, you kind of got it down. There's nothing in you that will make you stumble. But anyone who hates a brother or sister is in darkness. and walks around in darkness. They don't know where they're going because the darkness has blinded them. You have to interpret those words for yourself this morning. I have spent a lot of years trying to figure that all out. I spent a lot of years what it means to behave in love toward people. And I've not done it very successfully at times. Does that seem to be true for you? I've not done it very successfully at times. I've let my emotions get the best of me. I've let my anger get the best of me. I've let my tongue loose instead of controlled. Have you? I've let my attitude change. Because of what others have done. And so I've become reactionary. And Jesus says, my kingdom, it's about love. You know what John's going to do? He's going to write 5 chapters. He'll never leave this subject again. He'll put some other things in there. He'll keep coming back to this. It's almost like he say a few things. He say, by the way, do you remember my point about love? He'll say a few more things. By the way, did you get this thing called love? Here I am as an older man, about to pass from this life. I want you to get what matters. So look at these conclusions. And, I only like lessons with one point, don't you? And it really only has one point, but there are some things I want you to see. We're just told to act in loving ways toward everyone. And somewhere along this way, we'll discover the behaviors of love. But they're going to be kind of like what we talked about last week. We just took the overview of Jesus. They're going to be kind, and they're going to be compassionate. They're going to be forgiving. The behaviors of love toward everyone. Pray for everyone. Even if you don't like them. Even if they've been mean to you. And then you got to always remember, that's what's going to show the trueness of your life with Christ. That's what people are going to pay attention to. I don't mean to make anything light of being here in the building. I appreciate so many of you coming this morning, and I appreciate a host of people who are watching us live, and people will listen later in the day or later in the week. I appreciate all that. But the way this world is going to see the light is through you and how you act every single day as you show up in this world. And Jesus says, show up in love, and they won't know what to do with it except be attracted to it. Finally, they'll get attracted to it. And then, it sounds like John is saying it's necessary. It sounds like Jesus was saying it's not an option. If it were optional, I would not do it. Everybody have that down? I mean, I deal with these university students all the time, and they have a course here or a course there. They have the option. And if it were optional, I'll take the other. It's not an option. If you claim to be in the light and you don't treat the people around you correctly, you're in darkness. It's just that way. Well, have I bothered everybody this morning? Have I made everybody wish you hadn't come? I mean, I don't know how to do it myself. I mean, I don't know what to say about it altogether. I just know that Jesus came to this earth absolutely perfect in every way. And I know that he was mistreated in every way a person could be mistreated. And I know he grew weary and tired and hungry. And by the way, when you get weary and tired and hungry, do you get a bit irritable? He didn't. He didn't. Just as an example, when he grew weary and tired and hungry one day, he sent the apostles on to find some food. And he's over there leaning against a well, thirsty even. Not just hungry, but thirsty. While they're trying to find food, a woman comes. Right up, straight up noon. And he begins a conversation of kindness with a Samaritan woman who had been married 5 times and was now living with the person who is not her husband. Do you think you have to be super righteous about everything? Jesus wasn't. He could deal with the people who were in the biggest messes of life that you could get into. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is a lady you don't normally talk to. But he did it with kindness and with love and showed her living water before it was finished. He is love. All the way to, all the way to nails into his hands and into his feet. He is love. All the way to hanging in an excruciating pain with back that has been beaten and bloodied that almost killed him. All the way to suffocating on that cross. He keeps loving. That's why he said, Father, they don't know what they're doing. These people who are mocking me and they just don't know what they're doing. Forgive them. Because he is the man of love. And he calls us who follow him to be people who try to do the same thing. And we're going to take our communion. And what I ask you to remember is the man who loved enough that we might be cleansed of our sins once and again and again and again.